underneath, when you take out all the levels, the layers of humanity, culture, your background, your level of education, whether you're male, female, or other, all of those things, if we take those out, we're all human beings. There's a design of being a human being, no matter where we come from. And so when we take out all of those different layers, we get to the core of, what are our basic human needs, and we can work from there with greater understanding.
Welcome to episode number 57 of the 100 Successful Women, a Conversation to Inspire series. I'm your host, Vivienne, and today we have another extraordinary guest who embodies the spirits of global success and cultural bridging. Our guest today is Sally Lin, an international bestselling author, keynote speaker, educator, trainer, and NLP Master Coach. Sally's journey is as diverse as it is inspiring. Born in rural Victoria, Australia, Sally's path has taken her across continents and cultures. For over 2 decades, she lived and worked in Asia, becomes a master of bridging Eastern and Western approaches to education and business. Sally's accomplishments are truly remarkable. She's part of the 25 million Chinese immersion program for the Singapore American School. She also served as an interpreter for the 2008 Beijing Olympic Games, contributed to the international bestsellers Voices of Impact. Today, Sally is the founding director of Lean In to Succeed, where she coaches high-achieving teens and their parents, helping them to build confidence and improve communication skill. So without further ado, let's welcome Sally to our show and dive into her inspiring stories. Hey, good afternoon, Sally. How are you doing today?
Hi, Vivienne. Thank you so much for having me today. It's really great to be here chatting with you.
I am so excited to have you because I actually heard about Sally and how amazing she is. But today we finally get to chat, and we haven't really chat in a proper chat before. Is that right, Sally?
Yeah, that's right. We haven't had a lot of one-to-one time, just different trainings and different Zoom rooms, but with other people. So it's lovely to get to know you a little bit too.
That's right. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about you. So I know that, as you can see from her background, Sally have a Chinese name. Do you maybe just do a short introduction or say hi to people in Mandarin if you don't mind?
Sure， 大家好，我的中文名字叫林莎莉，这个名字是我初三9年级的中文老师提给我的。对，他是从我的英文名字 Sally Lin 翻译成中文林莎莉。我知道这不是一个比较传统的中国人的名字，可是很多人以为我是俄罗斯人，因为有这个沙，所以我觉得很有意思，而且可能我也有点像俄罗斯人，所以我在中国的时候，经常有人问我是不是白俄。
Oh, wow. So fascinating. 谢谢. Thank you so much, Sally, for that brief introduction. I actually have goosebumps listening to you speaking in Mandarin. Like I say before we start the recording, I never speak to someone who is like not Asian face in Mandarin. That's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It sounds funny, right? Coming from the 黄帽大鼻子的老外。
That's amazing. Yeah, I think a lot of people, I think your Mandarin is actually a lot better than my daughter, even though she lives with us. And then your Mandarin is definitely better than her. Thank you so much for your brief introduction, Sally.
And so, Vivienne, just for anyone who was listening who doesn't speak Chinese, I'll just explain that I was saying that my Chinese name was given to me by my grade 9 Chinese teacher. So, yeah, and I actually have her to thank. I often acknowledge her at conferences and things like that. Anyway, I didn't explain that part, but yeah, she's been a real inspiration for me, I guess, in my career. So.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. I didn't even think of translating or to interpret that in English. Yeah, thank you so much for doing that, Sally. Yeah, so again, Sally, where are you from again, Sally? Are you in Melbourne or Wagga Wagga now?
Right now I'm living in Wagga Wagga in New South Wales. It's about halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, roughly. And because I came back during the pandemic from overseas, I was working in Asia for 22 years. And I came back during the pandemic because life was very complicated and I couldn't get home to Australia because Australia shut the borders. So I couldn't come back to visit and check on my dad, and he was starting to need more help as he was getting older. So I decided that I would end my contract in Asia and come back home, and I took 6 months off to figure out what on earth I was going to do next. There's not a lot of work in my field in downtown Wagga Wagga, so I really needed to think about how to recreate something for myself.
Okay.
So I could, keep managing.
Yay. So we're going to go deep a bit more on your stories and your journey. And thank you so much for tuning in from Wagga Wagga today. I know that you play different roles in your life, Sally. You are a daughter, like you say, looking after your dad at the moment. You are a writer and you are a life coach and also the founder of Lean Into Success. So despite all the roles or the hats that you're wearing, this is a question that I always ask the 100 Successful Women's guests. Who is really Sally Lean at your core?
That's a good question. Gosh, then we could talk for 3 hours on that, Vivienne. I think, I grew up as a young Aussie girl in a small town. So there was a lot of freedom there. There wasn't the worries that many parents face these days about the safety for their children. We knew all the neighbours, we knew most of the town, and it was just a wonderful place to grow up. So I grew up with this very open sense, and my dad used to host international visitors for his work and things. So I think I learned to use chopsticks when I was 5. Just interesting things like that. There was a Japanese delegation and they taught me how to use chopsticks because it was, something fun for them to do, I guess. And I was interested. So even though I grew up in a small country town in Australia, I'd always had this sort of exposure and understanding that there was a bigger, wider world out there. And very curious to learn more, curious to experience more and go visit the world. So my parents chose the middle school that I went to. And because they taught Chinese. So I think part of my identity now is this, as has become over these many years, has become as a Chinese speaker, and there's been many times in my life since then that I've been the only kind of Anglo, the only white person in the room, So the opposite a lot of my Asian friends who are here in Australia or living in America or England. So yeah, it's really interesting life experience for me. So my Chinese friends, after a while, I'd been in China for a little while, and they'd be like, in Chinese people who grow up in Western countries, who call them bananas. So, what are we going to call you? And I was like, well, I don't know. And one day, one of my colleagues came running in and she said, oh, no, we're going to call you an egg because you're white on the outside, but you have a yellow heart. It just made me laugh because, that I just felt so welcomed and accepted. There wasn't not that we went around thinking of each other as different at all, but it was just their way of making me feel welcome. So I really thought that was lovely. So I describe myself sometimes as an egg, having spent so long in Asia. I have a sort of a way of being that fits in well in Asia, and then I have my very Western way of being. And overall though, I think what comes through is that sort of strong sense of egalitarianism that we're very fortunate to be able to develop in Australia. We don't have a very stratified class-based society. Everybody's equal. As long as you work hard and have a go, then people will respect you. It doesn't matter whether you are the boss of a toilet cleaning business or you are the boss of a big corporation. Everybody's having a go together. And also being a younger society, the modern history of Australia is much shorter than many other Western countries. So we're still creating our modern history together, and acknowledging the traditional owners of the land as well, and working through all of that stuff. So yeah, it's a slightly different situation than for some of the older, more established Western countries. Yeah.
Wow, so you are someone who is first of all, you are someone very curious since the very young age. And that's how you got into the journey that you are on. And then when you say you are from a very small country town when you were younger, is that in Wagga Wagga or?
No, in Victoria, in the Mallee. So northwest of Victoria. Yeah, a little place called Kerrang. So yeah, nobody really knows that place. But yeah. So yeah, I grew up there for 10 years and then we moved to Melbourne. That's where I got to start learning Chinese in middle school. Yeah, and then moved to Wagga when I think I was about 15, turning 16, something like that. So I finished high school in Wagga and went away to university from here.
Wow, that's an amazing journey, amazing start of your journey from your very young age and to a different variety of journey that you have. So can you share a little bit with us, Sally? I know that you tap into, you grow up having contact with people from different countries and you know about different culture. So can you share with us a little bit about your journey from, I know that after that you became a language teacher by trade, and then now you are a founder of Lean Into Success. How that transition and then what got you into that journey?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, Vivienne, I was a pretty typical, Aussie girl. Even though I had these, early exposures, my parents were, because we were in a small country town, they were able to get me a pony. We weren't a wealthy family, very average Aussie family, but they were able to get me a pony when I was 6 years old, and I grew up as being a horsey girl, loved horses, everything horses. Teenager, and I worked through Pony Club and I got better at my riding. I started to compete and do all the things. And I just loved it. And that was a big focus for my life as a teenager, as I worked through, that whole experience. So as I was working through my teenagehood, it was the horses that kept me very grounded, more so than, what happens with the ups and downs of teenagehood. Sometimes you sort of, that kids struggle through. So I was fortunate to be grounded with horses. And if you'd have asked, say 16, 17, 18-year-old Sally what her future dreams were, I would have told you that I wanted to go to the Olympics one day as an equestrian, as a dressage rider. And I had made it up to competing at state level in dressage before then my year 12 exams and everything came. And at the end of that year, I accepted to university. I got my dream course at the Australian National University. I really targeted there because their China Career Centre is very famous. And I was going off to university and couldn't afford to keep a horse, and for me to do that, so I had to sell my horse. I was broken, and I felt like that was the end of my dream. So, I packed up all my horse trophies and all my ribbons and sashes and put them out in my parents' garage and sort of, focused then. Luckily, I had the next thing to focus on, right? Focused then on going away to university and starting my studies. And I did a couple of years at university, and then I had the opportunity to go to China for a year as part of my studies. So in the early 90s, when China was just opening up, I had the opportunity to go off for a year of study in China, and year of adventure, I must say. It really was. In the early 90s, it wasn't very developed. There was a lot going on. So yeah, it was really such an incredible opportunity to be there at a young age myself, but also at that sort of early development stage as China was reopening after a lot of years of being very closed to the outside world. Yeah, people were curious too. So that was a whole adventure in itself, which led to me taking up the opportunity of a scholarship with the New South Wales, by then we were in Wagga, so that was my home state, New South Wales Department of Education. With the refocusing of foreign policy in the late 80s and early 90s, there was money being pumped into education and in Asian education, so Asian languages, Asian culture, all sorts of things. So I ended up taking a scholarship, and the agreement was to teach for 3 years, wherever they sent me for a job after I graduated. So that really helped, obviously, to pay my way through university, but also to know that I had a job waiting at the end of it. And, intentionally, at first my intention was I'll just do the 3 years of teaching and then get a real job, quote unquote. However, it turns out I really loved it, because I always loved learning Chinese myself. It was such an adventure for me. And I'd been there, so I actually had a lot of stories and experience and, already, I think at that stage, a deep love for my experiences in China that I could share with my students. So it sort of changed the game, and I loved it. So I kept going, and who knew that I would end up working in school education for nearly 30 years? I couldn't have predicted that at the start.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's 30 years, and then that wasn't your initial plan.
Not quite that long, but nearly. It really does. And I spent 15 years in the classroom teaching, and I was teaching Chinese, which was quite strange, with this face.
Did you teach in China or here?
In Australia first, and then in China. And not only that, but I was head of Chinese at a number of international schools across Asia. So, people would like, it was like a cartoon, double take, with this face. And they're like, are you Lin Lao Shu? And I'd be like, yep, that's me. Because the kids had been talking about, their Chinese teacher, and then the parents would turn up at school and go, hang on. Kids forgot to mention that she's a foreigner.
You were saying that your students were surprised to see their Chinese teacher to be someone blonde.
Yes, yeah. And it was so fun. I mean, I loved it. I loved inspiring the kids to learn, and also learning, over time, better ways to teach the language. And then I also ended up getting a lot into teacher training, because Chinese teachers, or teachers in China in general are taught to teach in very traditional ways, especially language. It's all about just memorizing, and a lot of the education practices are based on memorizing, so which these days it's not enough. Unfortunately, we can't just memorize things. It used to reward people who were the best at memorizing things and regurgitating, but nowadays, you can do that with your phone. You don't need to memorize a lot of facts. You look up Google and it'll tell you what you need to know. So what although one of the things we do need to be focusing on with our students these days is to understand what are reliable sources, where they can look, where that there really are facts, and not just a whole bunch of stuff put on the internet by whoever, with zero qualifications in anything. We need that sort of awareness. It's shifting nowadays. But the traditional approach to education. So I ended up getting into a lot of teacher training and helping particularly the Chinese language teachers to be able to improve their practice. In the international schools, a lot of the principals were finding a struggle, because the kids were in these in their main classes with inquiry learning practices, and being curious and investigating and asking questions, and then going and learning, and leading. I think sort of leading the way in terms of being partners with their teachers in their own learning. And yet then they'd go to their Chinese class and sit down, be quiet, repeat after the teacher. And it just wasn't working very well for the international kiddos. And even for the Chinese background kids who have been educated in Western style or international style schools, it's not enough anymore to just have to follow the teacher.
So was that the education style back in then, or would that be the traditional way when you were there?
Yeah, traditional way, and very much so for even now for a lot of teachers. So even in Australia, in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of immigration from China, and most of the teachers, it's the one language actually in Australia where most of the teachers are native speakers of the language. Because we're so isolated here in good old Australia, a big island, a lot of the language teachers are not necessarily native speakers. The French teacher is just an Australian who's learned to speak French to a very, a high level of proficiency, or the German teacher might be, an Aussie who's learned German, or sometimes they are, people who have family background, their parent or parents came from that language and culture, so they've learned that at home as well. But it's not necessarily fully native speakers teaching many of the languages here in Australia. But Chinese is one of them. When I started in the 90s teaching, don't do the math on that, but when I started teaching in the 90s, there were quite a few like me who were second language speakers, really encouraging the students to learn and providing that role modeling, if you like. Chinese is a very tough language because it's like two languages in one, right? You have the reading and writing on one side and the listening and speaking on the other side, and they're not linked. It's not, like English where we learn to sound, we learn all of our phonics and we can then sound out words. It's not linked. So you've got to learn two systems within the one language. And it's challenging. So we were good role models, I thought, for our students in the early days. And at least get their curiosity and their interest up, and so that they would go through with studying Chinese to those higher levels in school, and instead of opting out because it's too hard.
It's not easy. Definitely. I remember when I was little, I had to cry until the whole paper got wet writing Chinese character.
Yes. Oh my, I know. I remember my teachers in middle school making us write out every new word 20 times each.
That's why.
But you do need to memorize. That's part of the challenge with Chinese, is you do need to memorize, spend time memorizing the characters and also understanding how the characters work with the radicals and the sound, all of those parts of the characters and things like that. So yeah, but anyway.
Amazing. So you are you still teaching at the moment, or prior to returning to Australia, you were teaching, or what were you doing?
No, I moved into education. So I became sort of like the director of languages. So I was largely out of the classroom. Occasionally I do sort of, fill in lessons and things like that, or go and visit classrooms and the students would interview me and things like that. But no, I was out of the classroom for a number of years, basically running language programs. So I got a job in Singapore at one of the largest single campus international schools in the world, 4,000 students on the one campus. Huge. Wow. Yeah, so from preschool to grade 12, all on one campus in Singapore, in a very large, block of land in the north, up towards the border with Malaysia, actually, up to JB Bridge.
Yeah.
So in Woodlands in Singapore. So yeah, massive undertaking. And most of those students, out of the 4,000, most of them were all learning language of one form or another. So we had Chinese from preschool through to grade 12 available. Spanish was available kindergarten through grade 12, and French from middle school to high school. And when I first started there was also a Japanese program, but it was being phased out. So yeah, it was a huge comprehensive program. And I actually went back in the classroom for a couple of years, and I'm glad that I did, because the school had shifted their way of teaching languages to being proficiency based. And it changed the face of my understanding of languages, but also my understanding of how to teach languages in a way that provides students with building blocks, and also provides them with the understanding of where they are in terms of their level of proficiency, and what are the next steps and the next things that they need to do to keep improving. And one of the things that's hard for parents to understand is that you don't just learn a language for 2 or 3 years in school and then suddenly, especially a language like Chinese, suddenly you can read a newspaper and just walk around like you'd be completely fluent. It doesn't work that way, because the challenge of language gets harder as you move to each level, right? And so you have to build out at, your proficiency level might not move up. It might take 2 or 3 years on a similar sort of level of proficiency, but you're building your capacity, your proficiency in the language and in the grammar and in all of the understandings as you're learning. So there's a sort of a whole experience of that comes with language learning. It's not just, sit in your chair for 3 years and memorize a few things and you'll be fluent. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Definitely there is some improvement, that advancements of learning as well, and you got to see that.
Massively interactive, and the Chinese teachers were doing a great job. Like I could very happily tell you that was one of the best Chinese language teaching and learning programs in the world in that school. So yeah, really, and there was a lot of work that was done before I took on the directorship, and this continues to be a lot of work being done in that program. So it's very exciting, and one of the most exciting things was that I was tasked with developing and implementing a Chinese immersion program in the elementary school. So basically what we did was we took the American curriculum. It was an American school, so we took the American curriculum and we basically figured out how to teach it in the same pedagogical approaches, the same way of learning. Had the students go through the same processes that they did for English, but all in Chinese. So the writing process began as them drawing pictures. For example, in kindergarten, you can't write. So, you know, they were there, maybe some of them could write their names, but they were learning Chinese, right? So instead of having them, you know, write out all of the radicals, you know, or the, you know, Dan Ren Pang, all these sort of things for 100 times each, they actually learned, they drew pictures, they spoke about it. This is my dad, you know, Tishawa Baba. You know, my dad likes to eat pizza. My dad doesn't like to eat apples. You know, whatever was there for them to say, and they would speak it first, and then gradually put the language into and learn the vocabulary, learn to recognize the characters, learn to write the characters, to put into the actual writing of expressing their ideas and themselves. It was a fascinating process, and we had it was a ton of work, as you can imagine, but also just to be at that sort of frontier of developing that work was really fascinating for me. So
that must be very fulfilling for you to be able to get involved and be part of that.
Yes, it's a big legacy, you know, with the school fees and everything else. The legacy, you know, that program would have, I worked it out one day, would have been, you know, worth about $25 million in school fees just in the first 6 years of that program, and it's continuing. So, you know, it was always set up from the start that it would be independent of being, you know, run by any particular person or in, you know, any particular teacher. The curriculum follows the path of the school's curriculum. So it's not dependent on having a good teacher come in, you know, and doing things their way. It's all about having good teachers come in and then follow the direction of the curriculum through kindergarten through year 5 for the elementary school, and then into, you know, year 6 for middle school program. So yeah, really, it was just such a great opportunity and experience.
Wow, amazing. It sounds like that's a lot of work has been put in, and yeah, it's amazing to listen. It will be, like you say, it's a legacy, and whoever who use that program is going to be like impacting the second generation and make things a lot easier, not only for the students,
and it was targeting students initially. It was targeting students like me who were true second languages learners. So the parents had to have a lot of trust in the school because they were giving their kids to us and they couldn't follow on with the learning because they didn't speak Chinese themselves. A few of them did, maybe like the mum did, but my dad didn't, you know. So they had to trust that we were going to do a good job with their child's education. So they were also very much involved in the program and in this, you know, following the system and how we were doing things each year. And I made sure that they were very involved in that process of being explained to, and so they would be able to understand what was happening. So it was really such a great opportunity, and that was inside of future readiness. The school was all about future readiness, and we were they spent a lot of money and a lot of time doing a big R&D process about what would be the keys to future readiness for students. Over 100 recommendations came back, one of which was the immersion program, but we spent a lot of time with the whole faculty redeveloping ourselves and developing a system of competencies, because future readiness is all about skills. You know, we can't predict the future that our young people now are facing. Nobody really knows what's going to be happening in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, let alone, you know, by the time a kindergartner this year finishes high school and then perhaps university, if that's still a thing, then, you know, then what will the face of the world look like at that point? We don't know. So all we can do is really skill our young people with the skills and the competencies that they need. And that is sort of what we're talking about now in education, around mastery. You know, what does mastery mean? And it really is skills based, because no matter how far you go, you can always keep learning and developing yourself, right? So that's actually why, if you notice the name of it's here on the screen, my company is called Lean Into Succeed, because succeed, the verb. We think of success as some sort of end point. You know, we're going to stand on the thing with our, you know, champion thing and say we've won and we've done it. But success is actually an ongoing, it's a journey, right? So succeed is the verb. So that's why I chose succeed, not success. Because we need to always keep developing ourselves. Each, in coaching, we talk about the devil in every level, right? So no matter how good you get, there's a new level you can reach. And then you need to learn new things and fail a little bit, at the new level before you kind of figure it out, and then keep moving forward. So it's all about skilling our young people with competency-based education these days, or at least at the face of the forefront of education. The rest of education, sadly, is a little bit behind. When you have big systems, like our state systems in Australia, we are a little behind. We are falling down the OECD rankings quite rapidly in the last 20 years, sadly, because it's hard for the bigger systems to keep up with all of the current needs. With technology, everything's changing so rapidly. There's not easy. It was never easy to be a teacher, but it's really not easy nowadays. So
Wow, that's such a big I learned so much from the conversation with you, Sally, because I wasn't I'm not in education, but listening to what you just shared, it's a lot of work for the teachers in the education sector, especially within the country. And then thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. And I can definitely see that, you have such a big heart and such a big mission on bringing all this, or to help the next generation, especially like you say, they need these skills instead of just like education, like knowledge, right? Because skills is more important.
For sure. And that's, traditional education is falling fairly short now. So that's why, the coaching industry is increasing. They saying it's worth $1 billion a day or something, or it will be shortly if it's not already, because why? Because people they want to get the skills that they need and the understandings that they need to have much more quickly than doing a 3-year university program. That's already outdated. New South Wales government is just rolling out a whole new curriculum for the New South Wales public schools, and it took them years of research to get here. Now they're rolling it out, and it's going to take them years to roll it out. It's already out of date before they start. So it's such a slow process in a bigger system, and then you have, of course, there's things like unions and things like that in Australia, which also slow the process of implementation and making the change is very, very slow. Really, obviously there's reasons that those things exist. However, it does slow down the change that's possible at the face of things. So that's why coaching is really taking off, and that's really why I ended up doing what I'm doing now. In reinventing myself in my career, came back to Australia. I was having coaching myself, because I wanted to be able to, sort of clear some stuff that I'd been carrying around with me for a while. I wanted to be able to get, just clear my screen, if you know what I mean, and have then think about new pathways and what I was going to do next. And my coach actually said, would you be interested in doing NLP? And of course, I'm a language person, so I was like, I've been hearing about NLP for like 20 years. Yes. How do I, sign me up? How do I do that? So she introduced me to her NLP coach, and I took the course, and it was so mind-blowing for me to learn to actually understand the nitty-gritty of how language works. As a language teacher, I didn't know all these things, right? So I was like, oh my gosh, how is this not even part of language teaching education? All of these understandings. And then so that was just, for me, incredible experience. And I thought, I need to be combining this plus all of my learning and understanding. And I've worked with some top people in education. I got to do a day of training, and she calls it peace training. She calls herself a peace ambassador with President Obama's half sister, Dr. Maya Satora. So like I've met some pretty incredible gurus out there. There's a whole bunch of people, and they've written books, and the knowledge of how we need to be doing things differently is there. It's just taking a long time to filter down. So if I can bring that to my focus is teens, right? So teens, so that they can understand how that they can be more effective in taking on leadership now. often as adults in the room, we treat them like you'll be an adult once you graduate. You know, you graduate from high school, you graduate from university, you get a job with a title, and then you can, you know, be the boss of things. And it's like, no, their life is now, not one day, someday. They're living life now. So if we give them those skills, so I'm distilling all of the training and the experience that I've had to bring into empowering our teenagers now. And also our parents. You know, you need a certificate to do a lot of jobs in the world these days. And the only thing we don't need to be certified in is parenthood.
Definitely.
Right. So I don't have my own children. I haven't been blessed with that opportunity, but I've worked with literally tens of thousands of kids and made a difference in their lives. And so now I'm bringing that down into a more personal level. And working with parents, I've got some parent trainings coming up the next 6 months, just around how to understand, helping parents to understand education, what's happening at school, and how they can better communicate with their teachers and things like that to get the sort of results that they're looking for, instead of feeling a bit angsty. Sometimes it feels like there's a bit of a clash between parents and teachers, you know. One side has an opinion, the other side has an opinion, and you know, how do we communicate in ways that help the kids, you know, because at the end of the day, it's the kids who.
Wow, that's such an important work that you are doing there, Sally. Sally, I feel that it's like it's so needed, and kids nowadays that it's so different from our years, right, when we were young as well. And then with you been through, and like you say, you have teach like literally many thousands of kids, and you understand them a lot better as well. And then with the NLP and the methodology that you have, and which it wasn't taught in the school, and it's so important, right? I think these skills is so important, which I wish I did learn when I was younger as well. And as a parent, I feel that it's so needed, especially yes, parents, you don't need a degree, but we didn't give a manual how to be a parent, and you understand kids. I only have one kid. To be honest, I wasn't good with kids, but then with your education, with your knowledge, and what you're doing is so important, especially teenagers.
Yeah, it's a tricky time, right?
That's right. Teenagers,
all the challenges of being a teen, you know, with all the hormones and all the things that go on, and you know, and of course every teenager thinks their parents don't understand them, and you know, and nobody gets me but my friends, and you know, we need to look in and learn how to, you know, be able to understand the quality too of those friendships and the connections that we see, and how to seek out mastery. How do we learn from the people who are ahead of us, you know, in the things we're interested in? How do you learn from that? You know, even, you know, kids are always into all the online games, gaming and all this sort of thing, right? But you know, if you're gonna learn how to game, you want to learn from a master, not from somebody who's just figuring out themselves, right? So that's right, all of that. And this is, you know, the screen time is really a damaging thing too for our young people these days. So helping parents to understand the pitfalls and the dangers of too much screen time is also super important.
It's just a different times, and the technologies make things it's so helpful with the technologies that connect everyone together, but then there's a lot of challenging stuff, and with this, I think it's such an important message to send out to parents as well. I can't wait for your parents course coming up soon, and then I can't wait to hear about it and to learn more from you as well, Sally. So
challenging, I was going to say, especially challenging for immigrant families. You know, parents come from one culture, kids growing up in another culture, and you know, finding themselves. You asked me earlier on, I don't think I answered it very well, like, who am I, you know? And so, you know, who are we, and who are they, who are our kids? And if they can learn to create themselves in the world, create for themselves who they are, and own all the pieces of who they are, it brings a faster sense of belonging, brings them more grounding when they do step out into the world of work, and you know, all of these things. They're not looking to find themselves in, you know, in social media and things like that, because that ain't real. So how do we help them to have the skills that they need? So that's where I'm coming from now.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sally. And it's like whole journey that is so fascinating to hear you talking about education, and can definitely see your fire and your passion in helping this next generation. And yeah, over time, from you did mention that your journey from Melbourne to Wagga to China, Singapore, there's whole heaps of countries that you've been on. So what are the challenges for you for the past many years in living in different countries, maybe with the different languages, and how did you overcome these challenges?
I think I muddled my way through like most people do. But I think the biggest thing for me, which as I mentioned earlier, I think it began early and it was encouraged by my parents and their curiosities about the world, was being curious, learning more, because when we're truly being curious and wondering, I wonder why they do things this way, I wonder why people react in that way, I wonder why. If you are genuinely being curious, you need to suspend your judgment, because otherwise you're just going, well, that's wrong, we shouldn't do this, that's bad, that's better in Australia, I can't do that, no. All these things which you can either be suspended and sort of, I guess, stopped by your judgment, or you can just put your judgment to the side and be genuinely curious, and which leads to asking questions, maybe talking to people, finding out why. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to agree with what you find out. However, you have a better understanding of where people come from. So it's always interesting when you're outside of something, many times being in situations in China where people are talking about me, not knowing that I could understand them. And look, it must be American. No, look what she's wearing, she must be Russian, all these kind of conversations. And then I'd usually, wait till I was getting off the bus or the train or something and say, actually, you're all wrong, I'm Australian. And they'd be like, oh.
Freak them out.
Right, just for fun, but not out of judgment. I sometimes, of course, it was frustrating or annoying when things weren't going quite right, or I couldn't get what I needed or make it understood or something. However, again, with curiosity, if I just take a deep breath, put my stuff aside and figure out what is going on here right now in this moment between me and this person or this group of people or whatever's happening, that was really important. So I think curiosity has been a key that I was fortunate to have, and it's something that's missing these days because the social media algorithms feed us more of our opinions and more of our judgments about things. And unfortunately, we're losing that curiosity that comes, with being a bit more open-minded about other people. Everyone has, like, even our own family. In Australia, I've got a lot of Australian friends, obviously. The way that they do things in their family is different from the way that I do things in my family.
Yes.
So even you marry someone supposedly from your own culture, you also have family culture that comes into play. So there's all these different levels of culture, of our humanity that we just need to be aware of. And once you have that curiosity to get out from behind your own way of thinking and doing, and we can connect and understand. We don't necessarily agree, but we can bring a different level of compassion, empathy. All of those things become more available when we just put aside our own judgments and shoulds and all of those things that come with that.
Wow, I love that. I wonder, that's such a great question. And then curiosity is so important, and that's how we get to see things in a different perspective as well. And that's asking question is so important. And I learned that from the book that I recently read, The Super Communicator by Charles Duhigg. It's all about asking question, and then I love that you're sharing that. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll have to look up that book as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that I remind myself today as well. I wonder, and that's helped us to understand and get to curious and understand about different thoughts or different perspective from another person as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, I was just going to add, what underneath, when you take out all the levels, the layers of humanity, culture, your background, your level of education, whether you're male, female, or other, all of those things, if we take those out, we're all human beings. There's a design of being a human being, no matter where we come from. And so when we take out all of those different layers, we get to the core of, what are our basic human needs, and we can work from there with greater understanding.
That's such a beautiful sharing, and I think the world will be so much better if everyone get to understand this, right? At the end of the day, we're just humans despite all the different backgrounds that we have.
It really would be a better place, wouldn't it, if we all just could bring that understanding of we're all different and it's not right or wrong. I think that a lot of religion and all those things that different race, classes of society, all these sorts of things that are man-made constructions, we're all just human beings together, and we need to figure out how to get along.
Yes. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sally. I feel so touched listening to what you just shared. I wish that the world can be like a lot more Sally out there with this and with this message.
Hopefully there will be.
You were in the Beijing Olympic as well.
Oh yeah, yes I was.
And you did say that was your dream, to be at the Olympic.
That's right. Yes, my dream of going to the Olympics one day as a teenager did come true, but in a very different way than what I imagined as a teenager. So, and it's again a sort of a curious, when I look back, a curious pathway of saying yes to opportunities. So I said yes to going to China back in 1993 as part of my degree, and then later on I said yes to the opportunity to go and work in China at an international school, and then several more international schools after that. And over time, at first when I went to China, clearly I was a little reluctant to speak because I'm a second language speaker, and here was I being judged by 1.4 billion native speakers, so it was a little bit of pressure. But I eventually I just really got focused on communicating with people. I wanted to know about them, they wanted to know about me. So language became the vehicle instead of something I needed to worry about. Oh, am I getting this tone correct, or I'm saying this grammar the right way? It doesn't matter if all your goal is to connect with people. We still can do that. Obviously there are steps at getting better in a language. However, if we're really focused on just wanting to connect, then that makes all the difference. So gradually over time, my own courage in using the language built up. And then I would, just a friend of a friend, it was one of those, a friend reached out and said, my friend is coming to Beijing, she's great, could you keep an eye on her and, support her? I said, absolutely, happy to help. And so I reached out to her, and we eventually met up for dinner. I said, what are you doing here? She said, I'm a producer, I work with Channel 7 Australia, and I'm here to set up for the Beijing Olympics. I said, oh my goodness, how amazing is that? And we had this great conversation. I said to her, do you need any interpreters by any chance? She said, yes, we do. You're in. So it was really that simple. And obviously we met many more times after that. But just made sure that she was well taken care of in of her own life and finding an apartment, doing all those things she needed to do. But yes, I ended up working at the Beijing Olympics for Channel 7 Australia as an interpreter and what they call a story fixer. So the producer would ask me for ideas about what they could film in terms of cultural type aspects and for the Australian audience. So I set them up with a number of stories and all that sort of thing, and we went out, and the on-air guy would interview people and come up with things and explain different things about life in China and in Beijing. So it was just so much incredible fun. There I was on the opening night, with my access all areas Olympic pass, and speaking to the Australian athletes as they walked into the bird's nest, watching the fireworks go off and realizing that my own Olympic dream had come true as well.
Oh,
it's just beautiful.
Oh, I'm so touched listening to your stories. Make me like so emotional. It's like such a big it's a big moment for you, I would imagine, that because that was your dream and it came true, and it's such beautiful sharing that you just did that, Sally.
and in a different way. So my message to everyone is never give up on your dream. And, there's always a way to go back and revive at least some part of your dream. It might not be exactly the way you imagined it, but things can happen and still come true. The main thing is to have enough courage to say yes when opportunities arise, right? Because you never know where that's going to lead you.
Wow, that's so beautiful sharing that you just did there. And it's like, for everyone out there, please listen to what Sally just said. Never give up on your dream. It might appear in a different way, but just believe in it, and who knows, the star might align and you will be up towards your dream. Wow. Yeah, and tell us about your book. I know that you have a best-selling book, Voices of Impact.
Yes. Yeah, it's called Voices of Impact. This is the book here, and it's volume 2. There's actually a series. I think they've got up to volume 4 now. It's basically a co-authored book. So I have one chapter, and each volume I think has 20 women sharing their story. So one chapter each to share our story of overcoming some sort of adversity in life, and then what we're now doing in the world that to make some sort of difference through our work, having overcome the challenges and adversities in our own lives. So yeah, it was a really great opportunity. My first attempt to really be published. I've written articles for university newspapers and school publications and things before, but I'd never written for my own masters but not something that was going to be widely published. So yeah, I was really excited and proud to be part of that work last year, and met some incredible women who I'm still obviously connected with, and that network that we create for ourselves is also incredibly important. So yeah, getting to meet other women like myself was just as much of a joy as having the opportunity to share my story of overcoming some childhood trauma and the things that happened, and how life's ups and downs had led me to being able to fulfill on my dreams, but also to make a difference initially through school education, and now through my own work with my company and coaching and consulting that I do. So
yeah, for those of you listening, if you want to hear the full story from Sally, maybe get a copy of that book and read what's the story about. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing the book, your story, and a lot of the background things that you have done in the education and the profile moment for you at the Beijing Olympic. So what's next for Sally?
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. There's so much going on. I'm sort of looking now at as I was explaining earlier, doing monthly parent masterclasses around education, understanding education for the parents, and how that they can have more of a window into that world, and communication as well. So, and communication with their kiddos, because what happens in teenagehood is that parent-child connection when they're younger, and then it gets a bit fractured in the teenage years, and we really want to be encouraging both sides, the teens and the parents, to be having the kinds of effective communication skills where they feel heard. Kids are bringing more stepping into leadership more, and helping the parents to understand how to facilitate that a little bit more, instead of, particularly with Asian heritage parenting, it's more, I'm the adult, you're the child, you have to do as I say, and in this day and age, particularly with screens and the access to the internet, it doesn't fly as well anymore. Kids have access to literally the whole world of information out there, and that's not always a good thing. So we need to understand how to balance that a little better in ways that are effective. And that empower, it's all about empowering ourselves, or empowering both sides to come and try and meet in the middle. Parents still need to guide, kids need guidance. They're still like the teenagers, their frontal cortex is not fully developed yet. They're run by emotions and hormones, and yet they don't understand that, because they're in the middle of living life for themselves. So how do we help them as more as a guide, rather than a pointing finger, you have to type of adult in the room, and how do we help them to understand where they are and where they're going, and be more proactive in creating themselves, and the future that they want for themselves as well.
Wow, that's such, I say, so important, and I can't wait this program of yours to run as soon as possible, because I know that as a parent myself, that's a handful of the things for teenagers, and then like you say, they all these things is like a big daily challenges as well. I know that my kids are pretty good, but then sometimes it's just that because of the hormone, it can get a bit chaotic as well. And then
there's always those challenges, right?
yeah, but I think a lot of parents really need what you have, and then helping more parents and the kids out there. I can't wait for that to happen, Sally.
Yeah. Again. Oh.
Yeah, thank you so much for Sally, and I'm very aware of the time.
Thanks,
I really think that you got so much to share, and then such an important I really have a lot more to ask, but we're so aware of the time. So before we wrap up today's conversation, Sally, what is your one piece of advice for other women out there?
Sheryl Sandberg wrote the book called Lean In, and obviously I took that back because it's my surname as well. But I think we need to lean into each other, lean into the people in your world, and also don't be afraid to reach out to new people, to learn the things, to find out, get information, to support each other. Lean into creating community among ourselves. The network of women that I have, I'm so grateful for. Friends and professional friends as well, other coaches. I love this environment. In our workplaces, sometimes it can be, we talk about, sort of toxic behaviors in the workplace and that sort of thing. So we need to create, those really happy, healthy networks for ourselves where people are really out to support each other.
Amazing. I love that. I think that's such an important things that we can do, especially I love that I'm able to tap in the knowledge of all of you who are so willing to share, and then the network, the connection is so important. And I really appreciate you for sharing so openly, Sally, and with so many knowledge that you've just given us today. It's so helpful, and I believe that it's going to inspire a lot of people out there. And like you say, lean in, whatever that you need or whatever help that you need, just ask, because without asking, it's always no, right?
That's right.
Love
and
that.
Thank you, Vivienne, for the this 100 women successful women journey. Like, what an incredible resource and community that you're creating in the world too.
Thank you so much. And once again, I really appreciate you and other women for saying yes to be sharing so openly and so generously, and that's so helpful. And thank you so much for your time, Sally, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation with more sharing. Thank you so much, Sally.